Okay, so moving along to more literature. Shall we read the introduction to Macbeth? I guess maybe I should find it. Like, where is Macbeth in this gargantuan book? It got wet at one point, and that has been a tragedy. Because it's full of tragedies. Sorry, that was a dumb joke. Oh, this pains me how some of the pages like stick together now. I am reading out of this version still though because it has more footnotes and context than in like my pretty Shakespeare, because I have another version that is an anthology. Okay, 1343. I really like Macbeth. I read it for the first time, I think, as a sophomore in high school. And so I was around the age like 15, 16. And this happened with many of like my English class where people were like annoyed we were reading it. Reading Shakespeare, I was like, I like this. This is kind of fun. I remember in primary school, we did a production of Macbeth at the big ass theater randomly. Wow, that's cool. I love that. I really like that Macbeth is like it draws on a lot of indigenous tradition in Scotland because it's supposed to take place in the Scottish Highlands. So, I think that whether I even like recognized it at the time and first being exposed to it, I liked that. Um, it also is very witchy. There are three witches in this. I did also want to like do an exercise maybe of like as we get descriptions for these characters, if you all are interested in like providing in providing some context of like how you imagine the characters of like what they look like or what they sound like, especially so that I can like tailor the voices to what we want them to be. I'll provide some of like my own interpretation as well to the characterization, but like if you have a preference, do let me know. I think it was a city program or something for local schools. Oh, that's cool. I mean, good for the city. I mean, and it sounds like you're able to do that in a big theater. Yeah, probably not the whole play. That's usually how it goes. Like even with like high school portrayals of Shakespeare, it rarely is the whole play. Most of the time in films, we don't get the whole play. Like even on stage with theater companies, we rarely get the whole play. There are many things that are cut out that directors choose to cut out. Welcome back, Boonso. My big sister said she'd box me and practice Scottish Dirk fighting with me. Nice. Speaking of Scottish, reading Macbeth. Also, I don't know if your sister has like knows about your situation and like depending on your relationship or like the circumstances, like she may be able to offer some assistance. I think about Denzel's Macbeth often. Yeah, we watched that one. That one is really good. He did a really great job as Macbeth. And the person who played the witch, I'm gonna find out who this is. Macbeth, Denzel Washington. Yeah, that was in 2021. Yeah, Frances McDormand was Lady Macbeth. She's a really great actor. Catherine Hunter. This is the version we're talking about. Catherine Hunter, she played the witches. Yeah, Harry Melling, who plays Malcolm. Oh, he was Neville. Yeah, Corey Hawkins is Macduff. The cast is really stacked. Olivia Washington. I don't think I know who Jacob McCarthy is. He looks familiar to me though. Yeah, it's in black and white, which I like. It makes a lot of references to previous examples of Macbeth, this particular movie, like the oh, that was my neck. I don't know if you could hear that. The Orson Welles Macbeth, I think. Yeah. I think there's also another Macbeth with Laurence Olivier. Yeah, so a lot of the set design looks similar. See if there's Laurence Olivier Macbeth. I think so. Oh, it's unfinished. What? Unfinished film? Okay, this is the one in particular that I was thinking of. Yeah, it's like where he's sitting here, like on the stairs and such. That seems to be a big inspiration for Macbeth. Many people think as well, and we'll probably get into this in the introduction, because of actors only being allowed to be boys and men during Shakespeare's time, that there was a particularly talented young man that Shakespeare wrote the role of Lady Macbeth for, because Lady Macbeth is possibly one of the like most complex female characters in Shakespeare's works. So like the lines that she has are pretty lengthy. Does she have the most lines in all of Shakespeare? With most lines. Okay, Rosalind in As You Like It has the most lines, which honestly, maybe she has the most lines because she is pretending to be a man at one point. So, there we go. We can pick that apart as well. Had all the had all the core content and plot points, but I'm guessing it was cut down. I told her about it. She's jealous. Why do you get to camp all summer while I'm bedridden? Oh, she's jealous. Just like you and your family are going through it. It sounds like sending you all strength, healing, solidarity, good fortune. There was a really good animated Macbeth I saw once. Ooh, really? I found the event, the Shakespeare Schools Festival. They're still running it. Austerity policy can't catch Shakespeare, motherfucker. I mean, especially being in the UK. That's like, Shakespeare is like viewed as sacred in many ways, where people are like, you better not touch this. Okay, so I will preface this introduction by saying, like, providing a disclaimer, there will probably be spoilers, but it seems like most of us are pretty familiar with Macbeth. At least that's what it sounds like. Um, so just be aware of that. I would rather have like information than more information than less going into this. So if you do not want a spoiler for this, I will be sure to say in the Twitch title when we get like the notification and like the stream title when we get to like actually starting the play. Okay, shall we start? Macbeth. On May 19th, 1603, a scant 2 months after the death of Queen Elizabeth and the accession to the English throne of the Scottish King James, Shakespeare's company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, was formally declared to be the King's Men. So, this also goes to show Shakespeare would appeal to the ruling class, and how like he would create some female characters that were cross-dressing, especially during the time of Queen Elizabeth, and appealing to this new king by having it be placed in Scotland. Also, a big theme in Macbeth is like the divine right of kings. So he is clearly like sucking up to the ruling class, but like once again, this is how artists were able to make money, and he was able to like gain favor and continue his art by appealing to the king, but then also placing like some tidbits of things that were for the working class by having the characters who did not have titles speak in what they would call slang and like not iambic pentameter. Okay, ad break starting now. Was it As You Like It the one we saw? Yeah, when we went to London, we saw As You Like It. It was so good. It was really good. It was so queer. And like as we read in Othello, like Shakespeare itself really lends itself to queer readings as we're talking about boys and men dressing up as women and girls. So there's cross-dressing, but also like women cross-dressing, like dressing up as men in the play. And then in As You Like It, Rosalind is a woman, dresses up as a man, and then pretends to be a woman. So it's like there's like gender fuckery all over the place, just deconstructing what it even means to exist in gender. But this particular rendition like had like a higher meaning to it, which I loved. That was like, oh, at the end she doesn't go back to like being a woman at the beginning, but like is this combination of genders that's like that really spoke to my non-binary heart, and I cried. And at the end, the character of Rosalind, they did what is it called? Like interpretive voguing. And yeah, that was incredible. So loved to see that. It was hella queer and fun and funny. So all of the above, that was great. Okay, so appealing to the ruling class, Shakespeare is where we left off. The players had every reason to be grateful to their new royal master for this lucrative distinction and attentive to his pleasure and interest. It has long been argued that one of the most striking signs of their gratitude is Macbeth, based on a story from Scottish history particularly apt for a monarch who traced his line back to Banquo, the noble thane whose murder Macbeth orders after he has killed King Duncan. So, spoilers. Wait, this is so relevant. I haven't heard it before, but it came up when I was searching the event, a conceptual Akala song, where he talks about being Shakespeare reincarnated. What? Okay. I'm gonna have to play this. I don't think this can wait till Culture Corner. Oh, we don't need to see my face there. Okay.
Brother, listen, when I spit on the rhythm, I kill them. Roar like the ball of Brazilians, you don't want war. Call the kids brilliant blood, I'm the heir to the throne, not William McCarla. Smart as King Arthur, darker, harder, faster, as Clark. I kick that
Yeah, the song's called Shakespeare.
With a little twist, it's William back from the dead, but I rap out gaps and I'm black instead. It's Shakespeare reincarnated, except I spit flows and strip pros naked. Lyricist done the best on the road, nitro flow, oh so cold, I'ma blow yo, so real. This bit I kick now, plus I don't write, I recite my hits now. Straight from the top, expert timing. On top of that now, the whole thing's rhyming. No more tights now, James
cool,
Sagan. If I say
in
so
front of the
myself, I'm much
street
more
art.
handsome. Don't ever compare me to rappers, I'm so quick-witted that I split them like fractions. My thing, I tell them like this, it's like Shakespeare with an twist. You pumped off, feeling
So
like
kind of eerily perfect. Yeah. Synchronicities.
Everything I keep so crazy, there ain't no ifs or maybes. Spit poetry so shady, for those on road of my lady. Pumped off, feeling like you drunk, and my beats bump, lyrics sit
When
like
did this come out?
blood. Now everything I keep so crazy, there ain't no ifs or maybes. Spit poetry
19
so
years
shady,
ago.
for those on road of my lady. I'm similar to William, but a little different. I do it for kids, it's illiterate, not Elizabeth. Stuck on the road, faces screwed up, feel like the road's
Not
better out when they
Elizabeth.
shoot up. It's a matrix, I try and explain it. On the real though, still ready to blaze.
Like, I do it for kids, not the queen. Which is what's so amazing, he is Shakespeare. He's so good at wordplay of like, he's saying that because Shakespeare was doing it for Queen Elizabeth, and he's like, I'm not doing it for Queen Elizabeth II because they're both Elizabeth.
Contradiction, just face it, they so enslaved they worse than an agent. I raise stages, sharp as razors, don't get cut cuz keep your distance. No artillery, trying to be militant, y'all dudes killing me, think that you're killing it. It's embarrassing watching you babbling, keep spitting your darts, mine is javelins. The hood Tiger Woods, 2 million, number one for so long, it's just getting silly. Yeah, kinda like Bruce with the knuckles at the first time you ever saw Ali shuffle. You don't want trouble left laying in a puddle, bruv, you are having a bubble. I'm a whole different kettle of fish, now I'll shout, not mess with this. My thing, I tell him like this, it's like Shakespeare. I get you pumped off, feeling like you drunk, when my beats bump, lyrics sit like skunk, blood. Now everything I keep so crazy, there ain't no ifs or maybes. Spit poetry so shady, for those on road of my lady. Pumped off, feeling like you drunk,
Yeah, the captions are pretty off.
blood. Now everything I keep so crazy, there ain't no ifs or maybes. Spit poetry so shady, for those on road of my lady. Fair, no MC close to the man, little just
Hamlet.
jumping out of the pram. Everybody bad man behind a mic stand, it's not creative, one bag of hype and if you bust your ting, where's the mash? Move so much food, where's the caps? These dudes ain't real, they just rap, I don't spit what I don't know. Just the facts, no talk of rocks I ain't sold, shots I ain't blown, so cold and I own my own. My business ridiculous, sick with it, quick with it. Companies go head to head and I lick with it. Welcome to Ill Estate, meet your fate, mate. Talk truth but we don't play games. Move sick, look, sample techno.
I liquid it.
Never pull a ting if you ain't gonna let go. That's that rap track, clapping like a black cat, back chat, crack back. That's that, it's not a rumor, that kid a caller. It's not Akala, I beg your pardon. Don't get it twisted, you're on the sideline like a mistress. I'm the whiz kid with the sick. My thing, I tell him like this, it's like Shakespeare with an I get you pumped off, feeling like you drunk, when my beats bump, lyrics.
This reminds me of another song around this time period.
So crazy, there ain't no ifs or maybes. Spit poetry so shady, for those on road of my lady. Pumped off, feeling like you drunk.
Which I don't know if the song I'm thinking of, the lyrics are this. Or this on point. Do you know how to do area study? I don't know what you mean by that. Could you provide an explanation? Wow. Incredible. That was a great find, Linton. Thank you. Yeah, that's very apt for what we're talking about now. Oh, wait. I think I did have this a little bit further down. The subtle Shakespearean-esque language buried in there. Uh-huh. It's embarrassing watching you babbling. Babbling kind of gives me Macbeth witch vibes. Yeah, of like bubble, toil and trouble. Yeah. Incredible. I love that. And also like the reframing it of like, I'm Shakespeare, but I am not a colonizer. I'm not doing this for like the ruling class is incredible. Okay. In Shakespeare's principal historical source, Raphael Holinshed's Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland, in 1587, Banquo aids Macbeth in the murder of the king. Shakespeare suppresses this complicity. The witches, or, quote, weird sisters, because the word weird, I think, I'm going to look this up. Does this come from Celtic? Which means fate. So, like, it has come to be known as something that's out of the ordinary. But if you are saying something is like weird back in the day, that means it's fated. There's destiny associated. So we will encounter in Macbeth whether there is such a thing as free will. That is a very big concept. Edom Online, maybe I'll look up that one. Yeah, having power to control fate comes from Germanic. The weird sisters for the three fates, which also are the three fates are from Greek mythology. Yeah, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. I know in Gaelic. My grandma was a Catholic from the Republic of Ireland. I don't know if she spoke it given the erasure. Yeah, that's what's so sad of like the erasure of indigenous languages, and like that is the intent, is to get people to not be speaking language. I know there is a resurgence though in Irish being spoken, in more indigenous dialects being, not like there are indigenous dialects that have continued to exist but getting a little more noticed, or especially young people and social media connecting people, having more resources and having a resurgence in reclaiming language. Banquo aids Macbeth in the murder of the king. Shakespeare suppresses this complicity. The witches, or weird sisters, who tell Macbeth that he will be king, tell Banquo that he will be the father of kings. But Banquo seems determined not to be drawn into any conspiratorial attempt to realize these prophecies. When, just before Duncan's assassination, Macbeth indirectly asks for his support, Banquo speaks of keeping his allegiance clear. Macbeth's only conspirator, then, is his wife. Innocent of the crime against Duncan, Banquo is killed because Macbeth fears and envies him, and because he wishes to keep the crown he has seized from passing, as the witches had prophesied to Banquo's heirs. Other significant changes Shakespeare made in his source materials further intensify Macbeth's isolation and his evil. In Holinshed's Chronicles, Duncan is a relatively young and feeble ruler, and Macbeth, having dispatched him, goes on to reign brilliantly for 10 years. As Shakespeare staged the story, Duncan is a mature and virtuous king, and Scotland, under the tyrant Macbeth, is in the grip of a nightmare from which it will eventually awaken into the happy rule of Banquo's descendants. As is so often the case with Shakespeare, we do not have a secure date for either the composition or the first performance of Macbeth. The first printed text is in the 1623 First Folio, but the play, usually dated 1606, has always seemed the most topical of Shakespeare's great tragedies, cannily alert at once to King James's personal obsessions and to contemporary events. The most unnerving of those events was the Gunpowder Plot, an attempt by a small group of conspirators embittered by what they perceived as James' unwillingness to extend toleration to Roman Catholics, what they perceived when they were being oppressed, to set off a massive explosion that would blow up the king and his family along with most of the government. On the night before the intended attempt, the plot was foiled by the arrest of one of the principal conspirators, Guy Fawkes, who revealed under torture the names of his collaborators. That's actually when my birthday is. It's Guy Fawkes Day, November 5th. I do know one Simreg phrase. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Simru Embith. That's really cool. What does that mean? Looking it up. Wales forever? Is that what that means? That's cool. Love. I love that. I'm probably slaughtering that pronunciation. I'm gonna look up a video real quick.
Looking at Julian's pronunciation guide, where we look at how it's better. Some of the most mispronounced words in the world, like this other curious word, but how do you say what you're looking for today?
This is the first thing that I found.
Welsh phrase pronunciation, the motto of the Welsh Guards, formed in 1915, meaning Wales forever. Cymru am Beth.
Cymru
am Beth. Cymru am Beth. Here.
Cymru am Beth. Wow, I love that. It's funny because the average Scot of the Highlands back then had little loyalty to those outside their clan. Their only loyalty was to clan and to the spirits. That's why you found Scots fighting for the English against the other Highlanders. Yeah, and it's like, sadly, like what happens with many indigenous populations is that like there can be like infighting that's pretty natural. And I mean, the sad part, especially, is when colonizers use this to their advantage and they say like, oh, we'll help you fight this clan. And then they end up pitting the clans against each other for them to have dominance over all of them. I would like to be going over more of that history too. This introduction is mostly going to be talking about the text. It will provide a little bit of historical examples, but it clearly is not as like decolonized as what I would hope and want it to be. So I'll be bringing that in throughout the streams as well. Glencoe Massacre is a crazy piece of history. Yeah, I don't know if I'm familiar with that either. Maybe we can do a history about this tomorrow. Especially if you feel like there's a preferred creator that is talking about this. Oh, here's one. That looks good. What they don't say about the massacre of Glencoe. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly either. Scotland's darkest betrayal. I did check out Beautiful Trouble, and I do have a plan to go over the resources tomorrow. I think there are some really great resources there. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to be also looking this up. An estimated 30 members and associates of the Clan MacDonald of Glencoe were killed by Scottish government forces, allegedly for failing to pledge allegiance to the new monarchs, William II and III and his wife, Mary II. Although the Jacobite rising of 1689 had largely been suppressed, by May 1690, a continuing need to police the Highlands diverted military resources from the 9 Years' War in Flanders. It was a massacre orchestrated by the king to crack down on the Highland clans. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Of course, most of the stuff that I'm seeing, like the resources I'm looking at, it's like, this is what was necessary. Of course, the like common misconception and lie to justify ethnic cleansing of, oh, these violent locals that must be suppressed. They were invited into the village and then slaughtered. Jesus. State terrorism. All militaries are murderers. I mean, yeah, that is true. Yeah, and then we realize it's like for these nation states that don't give a shit about us. So, like, what is it all for? You know, it can be deeply disillusioning. It's like, and people who are part of these militaries are just used and come back, if they come back, traumatized, and often impose and act in violent ways the oppression that they were sent abroad to do, and they're just completely thrown by the wayside by the nation state that sent them off to begin with. They put them up in their village for 2 weeks before one night they attacked. Oh, Jesus. Fed them, sheltered them, cared for them just to be terrorized, and that's the heritage. Yep, that is true. Especially with these imperialist forces, particularly with colonizers, of engaging in complete bad faith. And the line that is just constant in order to impose this domination. Damn. Yeah. I mean, thanks for bringing that up, Linton. I do want to talk about this. You are hereby ordered to fall upon the rebels, the MacDonalds of Glencoe, and put all to the sword under 70. Jesus. So over 70 was the written orders given to Campbell. Jesus Christ. That's why I always encourage budding warriors to be non-state actors. Yeah. Yeah, where people are just so dispensable. It really is sad to see how human life on every level is not valued by most nation states, especially by these colonizing forces. Yeah, let's get a history of that tomorrow. Maybe we can watch that. Not like you have to, Linton, but if there is one that you feel like that is particularly good. I'm looking at one from Scotland History Tours. The one that has the title What They Don't Say About the Massacre of Glencoe. That looks intriguing to me. Yeah, so Shakespeare is appealing to a colonizing force, that even though King James was Scottish, it doesn't mean that he disliked the British because he was becoming the king, you know? Or the English, I should say. Yeah, I'll check out some of these and see. It looks like there's someone who has like a few videos on this, and I do like to see like people who are invested in like having a longer history. That might be a good sign, but we'll have to see. I'll check it out. Here we go. Among those hunted down, brought to trial, and executed for the gunpowder plot was Father Henry Garnet, head of the clandestine Jesuit mission in England. Which isn't to say, like, Jesuit missions weren't also part of the larger colonial project. Garnet pleaded innocent, but the government prosecutors made much of the fact that he was the author of A Treatise of Equivocation, a book showing how to give misleading or ambiguous answers under oath. I mean, good for him. At a harrowing moment in Macbeth, in the immediate wake of the murder of the sleeping King Duncan, an insistent knocking is heard at the castle gate. The knocking is a simple device, but in performance it almost always has a thrilling effect, famously characterized by the Romantic critic Thomas de Quincey as the reflux of the human upon the fiendish. A porter, roused by the hammering on the door but still half drunk from the evening's revelry, appears. A porter is someone who would like man the gate in letting someone in. So this is the porter, the person who mans the gate. As he grumblingly goes to unlock the gate, he imagines that he is the gatekeeper in hell, opening the door to new arrivals. "Here's an equivocator," he says, of one of these imaginary sinners, "that could swear in both the scales against either scale who committed treason enough for God's sake, yet could not equivocate to heaven. Oh, come in, equivocator!" This treasonous equivocator knocking on hell's gate is almost certainly an allusion to the recently executed Henry Garnet. The gunpowder plot. Okay, interesting. Saying he committed treason, yet could not equivocate to heaven. So, an appeal to, once again, the ruling class there. But we can also have in Shakespeare at times where people in the working class who are not part of these nobles with titles that most of these stories, or I guess really all of these stories are about, they are some of the people who are the ones to give the most truths of a situation, especially with like with jester or like clown types, like how we had in Othello someone who was a clown who was giving a very like biting commentary on the situation. And this is something that like the ruling class would allow, especially if it was said in a funny way, just like jesters would be at court or clowns would be. That like it had to be funny, otherwise then they would just like kill the person. But it often was a way for Shakespeare. So while he was writing these works that were largely appealing to the ruling class, which I don't love, but it was how he was even able to like get his plays to be created and funded. But he would say things to the working class, to the so-called commoners, in order to speak about the ruling class in a very realistic way. And he would often use language that they would recognize. And since the ruling class would not be associated with people in the working class, they wouldn't be familiar with some of the language. So he would often make fun of the ruling class by speaking directly to the working class in the language that they spoke. The gunpowder plot was only one of the king's sources of anxiety. Not surprising for someone whose mother and father had both been killed, James had a horror of assassination and was convinced that there were many plots against his life. How often this happens when there are people who have too much power and wealth that they just are afraid all the time. Like, maybe you should be afraid. Maybe people are very upset about how much wealth and power you have. He also held a powerful conviction that a king was a sacred figure, God's own representative on earth. Yeah, so this is like what I said at the beginning of like a large theme in Macbeth is talking about like the divine right of kings and ruling. And it says this word regicide, which means like the killing of a king, of that being like, oh, that's such a crime. Regicide, in this view, was close to the ultimate crime, a demonic assault, not simply on an individual and a community, but on the fundamental order of the universe. James, who had written a learned book on witchcraft, suspected the hand of the devil in any plot against an anointed king, believed that witches had at various points in his own life conspired to harm him or render him impotent, and feared the existence of occult, invisible forces bent on bringing all things to ruin. So, this quite literal demonizing of the occult, demonizing of witches, was a way to demonize anything that was viewed as pagan or indigenous as well, which is a very standard way for colonizers to, he was just licking the floor. It was a very standard way for colonizers to demonize indigenous people, and still is. So you'll see in Macbeth, like, the trope of witches, what we have currently understood to be witches. A lot of it comes from Macbeth. In several of his earlier plays, most notably in Richard II, Shakespeare's characters give voice to the theory that king is God's deputy on earth, and consequently that attacks upon him are evil. But kingship's claim to sacred authority is voiced exceptionally powerfully in Macbeth, not in Scotland alone, but in neighboring England, where, as Malcolm tells Macduff, the touch of the pious King Edward cures disease. Exceptionally powerful, too, in this play is the metaphysical horror of regicide. The murder of Duncan is marked in the natural world with dreadful signs and portents in the human world, with an overpowering sense of devastation, ironically given its most eloquent expression by the murderer Macbeth. So here are some lines. Renown and grace is dead, the wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of. So something else, like how it's talking about, like metaphysical and like the supernatural as well. I think a correction that, like I would, or maybe a distinction that I would like to draw is how many people think that like metaphysical work, like witches, of people having like intuitive powers, that it is people, like taking away other people's sense of autonomy or free will, which, like, under capitalism and oppressive systems, how much of free will do we actually have? That's a question to be asking. That is very limited, but rather, like, I think people can have more of a gift of understanding people and their intentions and what they might be doing. So it's not necessarily like condemning Macbeth to this situation. It's just revealing what he was already planning on doing. And he doesn't like that. But I think this particular play will be very relevant in talking about like the powers that be and how paranoid they are, and how among the ruling class there really is not a ton of like care of one another. There is mostly this protection of status and the class itself, not actually human beings. Macbeth is speaking hypocritically. Look like the innocent flower, his wife had earlier counseled him, but be the serpent under it. That's a famous line. And yet, at least in one interpretation of the part, he is saying what he himself knows to be the grim truth, far more than any other of Shakespeare's villains, more than the homicidal Richard III, the treacherous Claudius in Hamlet, and the cold-hearted Iago in Othello, which we just read, Macbeth is fully aware of the wickedness of his deeds and is tormented by this awareness. I would say Iago was aware, but he just doesn't care. I guess it's saying that, Iago is exhibiting more just complete lack of empathy. I mean, I think all of those characters it lists have no empathy. Richard III, Claudius, Iago. Hi, good sir. I don't know if you could hear him. Yeah, so it's saying that Macbeth, part of Macbeth's downfall, spoilers, is that he has regret. And these other characters, they have to be taken down by outside forces, and Macbeth is largely taken down by his own conscience. And so we see how, all of these fascists that are in power now, these people who are part of the continuation of colonization of the world, like Elon Musk being like, empathy is the downfall of the West. Shut up. But also, there's a reason they talk about this, of having any sort of empathy, caring about other human beings, and being made aware of your cognitive dissonance in how you treat people, having to actually question what you are doing, that this means that you are not allowed to just continue on your path to unlimited exploitation, and inhibits people from maintaining power if they actually are showing any sort of human empathy. So that just shows how evil it really is. Endowed with a clear-eyed grasp of the difference between good and evil, he chooses evil, even though the choice horrifies and sickens him. I mean, not really. And it's not like the whole time he is even showing this kind of regret. Before he has taken the irrevocable step, Macbeth tries to recover his moral bearings. The deed he is contemplating, he begins by telling himself, would work only if he could control all consequences, so that his blow, quote, might be the be-all and the end-all. End quote. But he grasps that there is no possibility of such complete control, and therefore no hope of practical success. His thoughts then turn to the overwhelming ethical arguments against the murder. He is not only the king's kinsman and subject, but also his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. And from these considerations, practical and ethical, Macbeth's restless and brooding mind rises higher, imagining that the murdered Duncan's virtues will plead like angels against the deep damnation of his taking off. And here's an excerpt. And pity, like a naked newborn babe, striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim, horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye that tears shall drown the wind. No one else in the play has a moral sensibility so intense or so visionary. No one else imagines so vividly the forces that lie beyond the ordinary and familiar horizon of human experience. I mean, I think Banquo has more sense of morality, but okay. Macbeth understands exactly what is at stake and what he must do. We will, he tells his wife decisively, proceed no further in this business. Why then does he change his mind and commit a crime he cannot even contemplate without horror? So it also is, we need to put this in context of why is it evil? Because in this particular context in Shakespearean history, where Shakespeare is appealing to King James, appealing to this idea of regicide is a sin. It's one thing, is it a crime if Macbeth were to take down the ruler, and also it's saying he's a virtuous king. What does that even mean? Can you have someone be a virtuous ruler when they are hoarding wealth and power? Sorry, I have cat hair on my face. That perhaps it would be more of a noble deed if he used the role not to or if he committed this so-called crime in order to have the working class people who have been oppressed, actually have power back and not have it be centered in the king and the ruling class, and not be taking over for the power for himself. A significant part of the answer lies in the instigation of his formidable wife. So also, Lady Macbeth can kind of represent this medieval, I guess this isn't in the medieval times, but especially this like biblical colonial idea of like Christian colonial idea of patriarchy with Eve, that she represents this temptation that if women have too much power, that they then will be corrupting the people around them, or like a force of evil. When we first glimpse Lady Macbeth, she is reading a letter. Reading was by no means a universal achievement for women of the early 17th century, let alone the 11th, when the play's events are set, but Shakespeare frequently represents it in his plays in a variety of contexts. The letter makes her burn with visions of the golden round, that fate and metaphysical aid seem to have conferred upon her husband, the golden round meaning like a crown. But even though she speaks of the crown as if it were already on Macbeth's head, she fears that he is too full of the milk of human kindness. So that is a common phrase that people use nowadays that comes from Macbeth. To seize what has been promised him. She resolves them to chastise her husband, to urge him, in a phrase taken from archery that has a strong sexual undercurrent, to screw his courage. Screw his courage to the sticking place. Lady Macbeth manipulates him in two principal ways. The first is through sexual taunting. So that also is something that's like, oh, you temptress. Women who are too sexual, that means they are evil and trying to manipulate men. Art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valor as thou art in desire? When you durst do it, then you were a man. Yeah, so she manipulates him by trying to make him self-conscious of his own masculinity and sexual prowess. How often this is a tool of people who are wanting to manipulate others in Shakespeare's plays, as we saw by Iago doing this to Othello in that play. And the second is through the terrible force of her determination. I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn, as you have done to this. So, essentially, like, her being viewed as even more of a demonic evil force, because she is saying, like, she's pushing away all of these ideas of what it even means to be feminine, especially at the time of like, oh, you're caring and submissive and motherly. And she's saying like, if I had this chance that you have now, I would, like, I know what it is to be like a caring mother, and I would, kill a child for the chance that you have. So also kind of highlighting the oppression of women, even though she is in nobility, but also kind of highlighting how if women, especially in patriarchy, are not allowed any sort of power or like positions of decision making, how it can force people to engage in more like manipulative tactics in order to get what they want and need in patriarchy. So there is that element as well. Can we get a Macbeth rewrite where the Porter and Macduff's assassins just kill all the nobles? I would love that. That would be great. Maybe we should do that as we go along. I do want to call out the bullshit, but also as we're continuing to have a decolonizing lens, like what would the ideal be in this situation? Not what's happening. These words and the gestures that viscerally intensify them on stage cannot by themselves account for Macbeth's decision. He counters his wife's sexual taunting with a clear sense of the proper boundaries of his identity as a male and as a human being. I dare do all that may become a man. Who dares do more is none. As for Lady Macbeth's fantasy of murdering her infant, its horror might have served rather to deter Macbeth from his unnatural crime than to spur him toward it. Virtually, everyone is subject to terrible dreams and lawless fantasies. Merciful powers, Banquo prays, restrain me in the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to in repose. But not everyone crosses the fatal line from criminal desire to criminal act. Yeah, what are we defining as criminal, and for whom? To what end? That in crossing this line, Macbeth murders a man toward whom he should be grateful, loyal, and protective, deepens the mystery of his crime, linking it to a long current of theological and philosophical brooding on the nature of evil. For St. Augustine, the theological and philosophical brooding... Oh, wait, no, I already read that. For St. Augustine, the great 4th century church father, evil in its most radical form is gratuitous, that is, without an explicable rationale or motivation. And this notion of gratuitousness haunts subsequent thinkers, including those far from Christian orthodoxy. Thus, the Florentine Niccolò Machiavelli, notorious in the 16th century for free thinking, writes in chapter 37 of his Discourses that when, quote, men are no longer obliged to fight from necessity, they fight from ambition, which passion is so powerful in the hearts of men that it never leaves them, no matter to what height they may rise, end quote. The reason for this, Machiavelli proposes, is that, quote, nature has created men so that they desire everything, but are unable to attain it, desire being thus always greater than the faculty of acquiring. Discontent with what they have and dissatisfaction with themselves results from it, end quote. Or maybe Machiavelli, if he was engaging in better faith and wasn't coming from a very classist perspective, would understand that desire and that a need to have things, or when people are dissatisfied, it comes largely from these hierarchies of human dignity. And that when people are actually given what they need, when they have the resources that they need available, that there is not this type of dissatisfaction that is just brewing in every single person. Okay, I think that is where I'm going to leave off today.